and welcome to another episode of 50 Shades in Grey, where this week, we are talking sex. Yes, we are. So this week at work, I had to do, or I was asked to do, I should say, the sex education talks at work with our year sixes. So year six, obviously, they're 11, 12, going into secondary school. So sex ed talks start in year 5, I think now, when it's based around puberty and bodies changing, and then they start to look at sex in year 6. So I thought this was an interesting conversation that we could chat about today, because they're always the difficult conversations to have with your kids around sex, about sex. And I thought I'd give you an insight into what sort of questions we was asked as to the two teachers that were in there at the school that I was at. And I consider it to be pretty standard right across probably the country. So as you'd think, probably when you think back to when we was at school, what you was up to at that age going into secondary school, I always think that the kids are a lot further along than probably not the teachers give them credit for, but probably the videos give them credit for, and by which time they've probably seen a lot more than you actually think. But I am always amazed at the level of their understanding of sex. And one of the questions that I spoke about with my children at school was that they should have open conversations about sex with their parents, to which obviously this was met with complete horrific disgust. So and that got me thinking on the way home of what I've done personally with my own son, and obviously growing up myself, because we've all been through this process. And although the world changes very quickly, that doesn't change really. The places that you may get your information from now probably change a lot more than it used to. The more I started thinking about it, like, they are conversations that you just do not want to have with your parents. But it depends upon, I guess it depends what sort of conversations that you're having. The biggest thing that the children found fascinating, which is always makes me laugh actually, was that people actually do sex for fun. They can't get that round their head, because by that stage, with science and with all the other subjects they do, they understand about reproduction and the reproductive system. So they understand that having sex will lead to babies. However, they do not get the bit about you would have sex for fun. And it is a little bit like, well, why would you do that? Why would you have sex for fun? So that always makes me laugh. And probably I think what we miss out on in the sex ed talks at the moment is linking them with social media, because this got me thinking as well that obviously in today's world of cameras and, people sending this and sending that, I think especially for girls and obviously for boys, but probably more so for girls, where they're sort of coaxed in, or they feel that they're under pressure then to send sexual images to boyfriends that should be there. And I know also I had experience of this with schools as well, especially secondary schools. And I was horrified actually at what age this actually starts to happen in secondary schools. Now we know with girls they mature a lot faster, and even with boys. So you have a 3-year maturation spread. So what that means is, to explain quickly for those who don't know, is that you could have a 13-year-old boy that has got the development of a 16-year-old. You could also have a 13-year-old boy that has got the development of a 10-year-old. And we're talking physical development here, but it also applies to emotional development, and they don't go hand in hand. So sometimes you can have a 13-year-old boy that's got a body like a 16-year-old, but still got the mind of a 10-year-old. So he hasn't got the emotional maturity. And you could have that flip round the other way. And obviously this is the same with girls as well. So you've got this 6-year spread for those teenage years where we're all at different stages. And I try and relate when I do our sex ed talks as much as I can to my own experience growing up, which I found absolutely horrendous. And my biggest memory, or my worst memory, was the graying of pubic hair, because I don't know if that's still a thing, but I know when I was at school, that was a sign of you're maturing, you're becoming a man. And it was a thing that all the kids, I remember in year sort of 7, it started, where all the kids would say that, have you got pubic hair yet? Have you got this yet? You need to have hair. And if you didn't want to get changed in front of everyone when you were doing PE, and you try to hide yourself away and get changed as quick as you can, because that was sort of the mark of getting older and being a man. And what fascinates me now, and what I say to the kids, is they're very lucky, because as soon as you start growing hair, everyone's manscaping now. So people are getting rid of it as quickly as they're growing it. So they've probably got away with one there. So I think the whole thing about, the sort of conversations that you have with your children and with your young adults as they were growing up, and for them as well, when I started to think about it, and I started to think back to Zach growing up, we didn't really have any in-depth conversations, but I think we've got quite an open relationship where we'll discuss sex without discussing sex, if that makes sense. So it's, because the last thing that kids want to do, and I'm still like it with my mum, the last thing kids want to do at whatever age you are, you don't want to know about your parents and their sex life. You just don't want to know about it. Maybe that girls are closer in terms of that. Guys, I think discuss sex relatively to a certain point. I don't think they go in depth as much as maybe women do, from what I understand. But it's about the relationship. And that's what I wanted to talk to today, about sort of what you're talking about with your kids, because I think it's important to broach the subject with them, because the reaction that I had, and I've experienced the last couple of years, is that there's no way that they are going to speak to their parents about sex. They're a lot happier talking to teachers, which, although we're educating how to have conversations with younger people, we don't have obviously the close relationships that you do as parents. So I think these are really important things to broach. And like I say, these conversations are starting to happen in year 6. They're very general. They're not detailed. It's what amazed me. It wasn't about, a little bit was about safe sex. Not loads of it was about safe sex in terms of condom. I think they get onto that in year 7 and start to get into year 8. But like I say, I've been out of that for a long time, the secondary side. So I'm now going to bring in my son to talk about this. So Zach, hello, mate. Thank you for joining me.
Hello.
Hello. Don't worry, because I didn't give Zach a heads up about what we was going to talk about, because I get a better reaction when I don't. So don't worry, mate. But from your, us growing up, and like our relationship, I feel like we've got a really open relationship, but I don't think we ever had major conversations around sort of sex. So where was most of your education from in terms of what happens in schools now?
Yeah, no, I can't really pinpoint any conversations we had per se. Like I said, I still, although we're very close, it's not really something I'd speak about or probably ask about generally. I feel you probably feel embarrassed quite a lot of the time. And to the same token, I think in schools it probably hasn't changed when you mention sort of what you had through school in terms of like the boys and being silly. Obviously I can only speak as a boy, but that didn't change at all for me. That was exactly the same. So I almost think you don't speak to your parents, but you also don't speak to your friends, because you don't ask anything that's embarrassing or talk about anything that's happening if it's maybe you're a bit behind, or maybe some boys will show off, but you don't really speak about things. Essentially, it's just finding out and learning yourself. So in terms of the source of information, I don't think there is one. Obviously, porn's a big one, right? Which is mainly for boys. I don't know many women, even now, it's quite. I don't think it's that common for women to watch porn. So that's probably a big link. Probably Google. I Googled so much, even to the starting without getting too intimate. Just starting even at kissing for year 7. I knew I was always just really worried about it, like how to do it, sort of the position. So you're just on Google. Your search history just looks disgusting in terms of what you're putting in. I remember practicing sort of on different objects, like it was horrendous. But you never. And the funny thing is, I bet all boys done it, like
Yeah.
100%, because you just worry about it and you overthink it in your head. The same can be applied to sex, but this is a less sort of forward example, starting with sort of kissing and stuff when you're younger. But I do think the age of doing everything is massively decreasing. But yeah, just Google was for me, just searching everything, sort of knowing sort of details here, and it's just sort of learning the functions. I think sort of safe sex is something that was spoke about a lot in school. I think there's certain things now in school I didn't really have in terms for women, sort of like the different treatments. Really didn't really talk about the pill, because I think for boys that's also important to know whilst protecting yourself, if that makes sense. Obviously, also for the women what they can take. I think at school I didn't really have, so like girls now, you have the coil, which I reckon most boys wouldn't even know what that was. I didn't for years know what that was. And then you have the pill. I don't really think it's explained to boys. I think you're just sort of scared really about safe sex and not how easy it is to impregnate a girl. That sort of plays on your mind. And I did it at school for me. But
Sorry,
yeah, it'd be
was
Google.
that was there? Because I think back to when like we had our sex ed talk at my school, and I always remember the teacher that did it was a guy called Mr. Chin, who taught sort of CT at the time, sort of design technology. It like what and it's no different now, because what the kids do is they try and embarrass the teacher, and then so they were asking questions that they know, and most of it seemed to be with the boys I had in our room as well. Most of it seemed to be around stupid names for sexual positions anyway. And it was like, do you know what this is? Do you know what that is? And and being in that position now with the kids, I mean, we don't have that depth. Like I said, like in year 6, they're just amazed that people would actually do this for fun. And, why would they do that? Because I think at that age, they're relating everything back to their parents, and it's just like their brain won't let
Yeah.
any images in. It's like
Process it.
just a complete shutdown. But I mean, obviously, was that still like we didn't have like the access to porn in those days that the kids now? But was that sort of like the main tool for learning? Did it seem to be like general across the schools at that age? Was the main tool for learning a lot was sort of the access to porn now and how easy it is?
Probably in terms of visualization, I think for like Google Images, obviously there's a lot of porn online as well. It's not just videos; it's sort of stills as well. So probably for a lot of guys, it's just visualization in terms of seeing things. But in terms of sort of the mechanics and what you're doing, I think you can watch it all you want. It's not really a true representation, as they do say in school, but it is the case really. It's not always a true representation of what it's like. So I feel it's quite misleading, and you can watch as much as you. I mean, I didn't really that much, to be honest, in terms of like learning. And it weren't really. It was more just visualization and just seeing. But in terms of like the actual mechanics of it, if you will, I don't feel like it makes you any more confident going into sex just because you've watched porn. It's like saying reading an instruction manual and then expecting to build a house or build a wall. Like it's not. You need hands-on experience, as I as I may say. So it's sort of a try and improve sort of situation. But I was the same at school. You never have proper sex ed teachers. Bless the teachers. You have sort of people covering, playing videos, and answering loads of questions who don't work in that department. They're just purely maths teachers, English teachers
Yeah.
doing a field day. So it hasn't changed. I don't know what it's like now, but you're doing the exercises where it is a little bit of a pee take, and everyone's sort of laughing because it is a bit awkward as well
I think it relieves the embarrassment of it. I know I would.
for everyone. Yeah,
A couple of my parents spoke to me a couple of days later, and they were saying it was funny. They were listening to the sort of kids, and that the reasoning they came up for the two teachers that were selected for it was that
yeah.
they had the most experience of all the other teachers for sex, which
But they didn't tell them that.
no, so the parents were telling us, and they were just laughing about it, and I was like, yeah, that's probably not the case.
Yeah, that is quite funny.
I think it was just the two teachers that had free periods at that time. But I actually really enjoy doing them because I
Yeah,
think, well, only because I try to be as honest as I can, and I'll talk about the things that I remember being most important at that time, especially to the boys, because just like you said, like with the kissing thing, it is like you end up, and it's stupid things that play on your mind, like which way do I lean my head when I
yeah,
kiss, and like what happens if she does the same, and it's all really awkward. And I had these visions of like, because I was quite a late starter, and I was probably 2 or 3 years behind all the other kids at school in
yes,
terms of like maturity. not emotional, obviously, but in physical development, definitely. So I spent a lot of time sort of changing very, very quickly for PE because it was always like you
Yeah,
always
so
had the one lad in year seven that was fully developed, had like pubic hair everywhere and was swinging himself about. And he seemed to be the most, then they got the reputation of being the most popular kid in the school then. Through not through looks or that they were a nice guy, just the fact that they were more developed than everyone else,
yeah,
and it seemed to stay with them. No, I do remember that about kissing. It was all like sort of, you know, the the different bases, if you will, to use a sort of an analogy of,
yeah,
what do you do, and it's all very robotic as well when it first happens.
yeah.
So it's almost sort of like I just want to get this done. I just want to get
No,
out of
and
the way.
that's why it literally is that, and it makes me laugh. But I don't know if this is why one big factor why guys will look at their sort of virginity in a different way to women, because I know a lot of boys at school where it was almost the first time sort of having sex. If it wasn't a girlfriend, it was just getting out the way, so you can almost wipe away the rust, and then you're good to go. Like it's essentially just getting stuck in, just getting it done, cleaning the slate, and then you're good to go. But
And I think that's because boys build up a pressure for each other, don't they?
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Because it's all that egotistical testosterone, where
Yeah,
of like, have you done it yet? Have you,
yeah,
and I was always very honest and like no, and then you always had that sort of virgin thing at school, didn't you? Where you're still a virgin, and it's like,
mm,
and it's so stupid when you look back on it now. It's like it's so
yeah.
ridiculously
It's a big
stupid.
deal at the time, though.
But at the time, and I do try and remember that in when I'm speaking to the kids that and you want to go listen, like you look back on this and wish you'd have taken your time probably a little bit more. But I always remember like the school discos where you used to see kids kissing and like they literally wouldn't move and they would just sort of stand there with their tongues down each other's throats for like 2 minutes while kids were timing them like it was sort of like you had to beat a record and
Yeah,
then they just walked off and then you get that thing of where you're going out with girls that you never actually see or never speak to and then it's over before you've even had a conversation with them like and then I remember in year 8 that there were girls and guys that were already having sex in year 8. I don't know
yeah,
if at your school that was the same.
yeah. It was, yeah, yeah. No, it was. I think it depends how developed you are.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Yeah, a lot. I was really late, so sort of I was ridiculously late to most stuff. But sort of the just kissing really, but everything else I was really late. Just because I hadn't developed really, so I was probably just quite self conscious. But
No way I'm taking my trousers off in front of it.
the upper half was fine, the swimmer's physique or the football's physique, but anything else, I was like, no. But yeah, no, it was really early. It was for a lot of the boys. I know a lot of my friends were very early, but it does depend. It's not everyone. It's just also the ones who had girlfriends. They're probably more likely to sort of be a bit more advanced in that sense. But no, it was exactly the same. But I don't feel like it's changed much. And even with the sex talks you have, especially in secondary school, I do feel there is still quite a high level of embarrassment, even amongst because they do it obviously in same sexes. But I still think there's a high level of embarrassment in terms of when I done it. You really want to ask questions, and you're actually quite intrigued about a lot of the answers, even when the teachers are talking. But you never really want to ask the questions or be the one to ask those questions. I always thought when I was at school it'd probably be a lot better if you had sort of a what they do a lot now actually, so they probably do it, but you have sort of forums where you ask questions silently, so it's basically anonymous, and then it's anonymized the process, and then you basically read the questions out and then the teachers go
Yeah.
through them. I think that'd be a lot better process, and I'm sure they do it now in secondary particularly, because you can actually go through some questions or a lot of the questions that probably a lot of the boys have or girls without basically one of them having to instigate the conversation and take that level of embarrassment asking it, because a lot of people do. Some people may not feel embarrassed at all asking questions or being inquisitive, but a lot of people do get embarrassed. I know I did. I'd never ask anything or ask how to do things. It's just you just feel a bit embarrassed not knowing, and people taking the mic.
Yeah, what we did, we had like a question box where that they could write them down, obviously anonymously, and put them in, and then we were reading them out and asking them and answering them as best we could
Yeah, that's good.
and as honestly as we could. But a lot of them, I say, were about understanding. And our kids are brilliant. I got to say, our kids are really good. But it was a lot about, why would you do this? Why would you do this for fun? It doesn't sound good at all. Like, why would you do it? And I found that like the videos as well, but like I said, they didn't connect it to anything like sending sort of sort of sexting people in terms of pictures. And
Yeah.
I do remember, I think it may have been year 8 that these sort of started through other schools when I spoke to teachers. Was that much of a thing when you was at school?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, sort of year 8 really. You start getting sort of stuff escalated round, and then sometimes I'd had a few years, not mine, but also other years where you sort of have photos that are leaked. Then you have sort of people getting in trouble or people having to go in because it's mostly girls really, or like even pictures of boys have been leaked where people have sort of screenshotted them or shared them after they broke up after 2 days. And it's, yeah, year 8. I imagine it's year 7 now, to be honest, because
Yeah,
everything's just getting.
which I find frightening, absolutely frightening.
Yeah, but it doesn't in the sense that if I'm sort of, we're Essex now, we're obviously both of us are Essex. When I'm seeing kids at year 8, year 9 vaping every day, it doesn't surprise me that then if drugs has come like that, it doesn't surprise you that sex has come in the same way. So I think the two go hand in hand, really. So it doesn't really surprise me. And with social media now, you're just seeing a lot more as well. You're more vigilant and you can see a lot more what's going on and what people are doing. So it doesn't really surprise me.
I was going to ask you that actually, because like with social media now, it is all about um, sort of self promotion. Even myself now, for someone that I used to hate taking selfies,
Yeah,
I can do it now without the embarrassment of doing it, and I don't think anything of it. Where I used to actually, if I
yeah, I
saw
know.
so, if I saw someone taking selfies in the street, I'd be, "Oh, bloody idiot," you know.
I still do that.
Just get on with it. Where I'm now stopping and taking selfies because you're promoting this or and
Yeah,
for the podcast as well. We're doing all this stuff that it's sort of evolved definitely for me that I'd never had any idea about. So to get like with the girls and the guys now in sort of secondary schools, is there much shame in it? Like like you just said. So say a girl and a guy are going out, they start exchanging photos, and then, like they do, 2 weeks later, they break up, and the girl, has got the up with him, so she shows the photos, and the boy shows it. But is there any embarrassment about that anymore, or do people like are kind of used to it, so they go, oh,
Uh, for me it'd be exactly the same in terms of it still be quite embarrassing. You obviously don't want photos of yourself circulating around, particularly sensitive photos. So yeah, for me it wouldn't have changed. I don't know if maybe the rise of sort of portals such as OnlyFans and platforms like that, maybe there's less sensitivity around sort of explicit photos without being full nudity. So maybe bikini photos. I think maybe more younger girls and guys are more open about showing their bodies via social media
that's what I mean.
publicly. Yeah, particularly girls. I think they probably feel more confident to do so. Than maybe when I was at school, you wouldn't really see bikini photos a lot at sort of a younger age. But now, probably they feel more empowered to do so, and boys as well, because like whether that's gym and your physique. But in terms of like nudes and stuff circulating, I don't think there'd be any
It's
change in
still
the
just
mindset.
yeah, it's still.
Yeah, because you don't think circulating, everything's permanent nowadays, which they do say in school, but it is permanent. You're sort of, particularly now more than ever, your digital footprint is huge, and it can really jeopardize. I mean, you see celebrities that go to do things and stuff dug up from 5, 10 years ago, and it's not necessarily now, but it's potentially where maybe you'll be in 5, 10
Yeah.
years and stuff can come up to haunt you. And I think having that, whether that's work, whether that's socially, I think you do need to be really careful, um, as much as you can do so. You just need to watch your digital footprint. I feel.
So going back to like the first point, I mean, like, so for me and you, I feel like we've got a very open relationship, and although we don't talk about sort of our own sex lives, as it were, we're
Yeah,
both. I think there is a trust that you could if you needed to, and I think that's the most important thing for parents and their children to have. Do you feel like there was anything that I could have done better with you that may help other people that got kids the ages that you were at that time?
it's a hard question, really, because I think it depends completely on the boy or the girl, because some people get really embarrassed. I know, sort of, my family, thinking of the kids in my family when they were younger, sort of my age, they were very sensitive. So I think it depends completely on the character. I think some probably are really forward and probably don't think anything of it, like asking questions, but you probably get some kids that it sort of haunts them having to ask those questions to their parents. They'd rather do all the digging themselves online
Yeah,
and hide away and not share anything, and they get really easily embarrassed. But for you, not at all, really. Yeah, there's nothing that I was ever worried about, because if it was such of an if it was such that much of an issue, I would have spoke about it. But there are certain things that maybe are sort of insecurities, but I don't feel like I would have talked about them with you either. Sort of, oh, when you're going to hit puberty, or sort of doing this and that. I don't feel like that'd be any different, because some things are just quite uncomfortable to talk about. Um, I probably would have done the same. But no, I do think it's difficult. But I think as a parent, you still just have to maybe judge the context in terms of how you feel they're like. So I don't know if parents can read maybe what their kids are up to, or if they're innocent, if they're not. I don't know. I think it's hard to tell, if I'm being honest.
yeah. I think like for me, growing up without a dad as well, you don't have that male influence.
No.
So most of my not, well, I wouldn't say knowledge, but it was like really simple things for me, like in terms of hygiene and keeping clean. And I remember talking to you about that because that was one thing that, growing up, I found that you had to learn. They're really silly things that people can sort of tell you. But most of mine was sort of handed down from my brothers, which is not always was not always the best thing because they found it very funny to tell me all sorts of things when I was younger. Yeah, I think it's probably if you're a single parent and you've got a son and you're a mum, or you're a dad and you've got a daughter. I think that they may be steep learning curves as well for both parties because especially a dad with a daughter, I can imagine that's really difficult.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd hate to have that situation.
Yeah. Well, listen, mate, thank you very much for being so open and honest as usual. Guys, thank you for listening to our podcast today. Hopefully it's helped you. Send me your questions. I've had a couple of really lovely messages lately of viewers saying about how much they enjoy the podcast. And that's always really nice to hear because I sit here and record them and I send them out. And you never know really where they go or if they are helping people or people who are interested in listening to them and enjoying them. So if you are, thank you. And make sure you follow us and give us your feedback. But we'll catch up with you soon. Take care. Have a good evening. Cheers, bud.
So.
Cool. Just let that.